You had some interesting perspective in the New York Times. You talk about the fact that a lot of these charges seem to be repetitive. What did you mean by that?
Well, it's the practice in military justice cases to try to bring as many different charges as possible, sometimes for the purpose of pleading for the contingencies of proof. In other words, prosecutors don't know quite how the evidence will unfold in the courtroom, and sometimes it's with an effort to, let's say, offer an incentive to the accused to make a pretrial agreement with the government. Which of those is the case here, I think it may be premature to say, but at least it's a thought that occurred to me and other students of the field.
Now, as another point, one of the new charges is aiding the enemy. Many have noted, including yourself, that the enemy was not identified. People assume it is WikiLeaks. What do you make of this charge? Well,
it's an interesting charge. It's quite vague. It basically says, and by the way, I'm holding the charge sheet if people are curious. It basically alleges that between two given dates, Private Manning, without proper authority, knowingly gave intelligence to the enemy through indirect means, and neither the enemy nor the means are identified. Now, it may be that this is simply a placeholder, and it'll be amended down the road, because there's a lot of things that are going to happen in this case between now and, assuming there is a trial, when the trial is held.
Well, you know, it's interesting. WikiLeaks on a Twitter feed responded to that aiding of the enemy charge and said it was a vindictive act on Manning for exercising his right to silence. But we also know there have been credible reports that the government was having trouble linking Bradley Manning directly to Julian Assange or WikiLeaks. What are you to make of that, especially in light of the number of charges, again, that we learned of yesterday?
Well, it may be that the government is trying to bring pressure on Private Manning so he implicates Mr. Assange or other people. We don't know. What's interesting, of course, is that Mr. Manning, or Private Manning, is on the way to being charged in a court-martial. Mr. Assange, under U.S. law, cannot be prosecuted in a court-martial. So you may have, assuming that any federal charges fall out against Mr. Assange, you may have parallel universes operating here. Private Manning in one courthouse and Mr. Assange in another.
And quickly, I've got to ask you, the military says, of course, that the enemy charge is one that could be a capital offense, but the prosecution has decided against recommending the death penalty. Again, your thoughts on that?
Well, the final word on that is not the prosecution's. The final word is the commanding officer, the commanding general, who's going to have to make a decision. Obviously, the lawyer's recommendation would be entitled to substantial weight, but ultimately, the lawyers don't make that decision. It's made by a commander.
All right, Eugene Fidell, a military law teacher at Yale Law School. Professor, thank you so much.